The void between stars pulsed with an unnatural stillness as the Zarkax battle group emerged from subspace. Massive vessels, each a testament to technological supremacy, glided through the darkness like silent predators. Their hulls absorbed and redirected light, rendering them nearly invisible against the cosmic backdrop. Commander Vrel stood on the central command deck of the lead vessel, his multiple eyes scanning holographic displays that shimmered with intricate data streams. Centuries of galactic conquest had refined the Zarkax approach to planetary subjugation. They were not mere invaders, but systematic administrators of cosmic order. Every civilization they encountered was cataloged, analyzed, and ultimately integrated into their vast interstellar network. Resistance was always futile, always predictable. Or so they believed. The holographic representation of Earth rotated slowly before Vrel's gaze. Blue and green, swirling with clouds, the planet looked deceptively fragile. Years of reconnaissance had provided extensive data, primitive communication networks, rudimentary space exploration, fractured political systems. The human species appeared to be exactly what the Zarkax expected. Another developing civilization on the brink of either self-destruction or forced evolution. Senior analyst Crane approached, her digital tablet projecting complex algorithmic projections. "Commander," she began, her vocal modulator creating a precise, emotionless tone, "our predictive models show a 99.7% probability of successful planetary integration. Human defensive capabilities are minimal. Their technological infrastructure is compartmentalized and inconsistent." Vrel's secondary optical sensors flickered, a gesture equivalent to a human's raised eyebrow. "Elaborate," he commanded. Kren's projection shifted, displaying a complex web of human communication networks, military installations, and technological centers. "Their potential for resistance is mathematically insignificant. We've identified multiple entry points with minimal defensive capabilities. Their most advanced weapon systems would require approximately 3.6 standard galactic cycles to pose any meaningful threat." The command deck hummed with a quiet confidence. Rows of mural-linked operators maintained precise synchronization, their consciousness partially merged with the ship's advanced computer systems. Each movement was calculated, each decision a product of collective intelligence that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Historical records displayed alongside the planetary scan showed previous conquests. Civilizations that had resisted, civilizations that had surrendered, civilizations that had been systematically restructured for maximum efficiency. The Zarkax did not see themselves as conquerors, but as evolutionary catalysts. They brought order to chaos, structure to randomness. "Prepare initial reconnaissance teams," Vrel instructed. "Standard infiltration protocols. We will begin by mapping critical infrastructure and social communication nodes." A three-dimensional grid appeared, highlighting potential landing zones and strategic points of interest. Major population centers, communication hubs, government facilities, all marked with precise coordinates and probability matrices. The humans would not even comprehend the scale of what was approaching. Kren's additional analysis continued. "Atmospheric composition is compatible. Gravity within acceptable parameters. Biological adaptation protocols are already being prepared. Our reconnaissance units can integrate seamlessly into local environments." What the Zarkax did not understand, could not understand, was the fundamental unpredictability of human nature. Their advanced systems, built on millions of years of calculated evolutionary progress, were about to encounter something beyond their comprehensive models. As the first reconnaissance shuttles prepared for deployment, a sense of inevitability permeated the massive vessel. Another world would soon join the grand network of Zarkax administration. Another civilization would be guided, restructured, optimized. They were wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. The first shuttles began their silent descent towards Earth, carrying with them the absolute certainty of technological superiority. None of the sophisticated algorithms, none of the collective intelligence could prepare them for what awaited in a quiet suburban backyard. Suburban silence wrapped around the Rodriguez household like a familiar blanket. Afternoon sunlight filtered through maple trees, casting dappled shadows across a meticulously maintained backyard. Sprinklers hummed softly in the distance, and the gentle hum of suburban life created a deceptive backdrop of normalcy. Emily Rodriguez sat amid her carefully arranged world. A circular tea party spread before her, populated by an eclectic collection of stuffed companions. Mr. Whiskers, a threadbare gray cat with one button eye slightly askew, occupied the place of honor. Beside him, a rainbow-colored unicorn named Sparkle balanced precariously on a small wooden chair. A well-loved teddy bear with patches on its elbows completed the tea party ensemble. The reconnaissance team materialized with precision that defied human perception. Their advanced camouflage technology bent light around their bodies, creating near-perfect invisibility. Specialized sensory equipment scanned the environment, collecting data with microscopic precision. Each team member represented the pinnacle of Zarkak's infiltration technology. Biological adapters capable of molecular reconfiguration to match local environmental conditions. Team leader Xorn directed silent commands through neural linkages. Initiate environmental mapping. He transmitted to his team. Identify critical infrastructure. Locate communication nodes. Assess potential resistance capabilities. Standard protocol dictated a systematic approach. Scan. Analyze. Prepare for integration. Hundreds of planetary conquests had followed this exact methodology with mathematical precision. Emily hummed softly, arranging a delicate tea service. Ceramic cups, some pristine, some sporting tiny chips from years of loving use, were carefully positioned. A plastic teapot, its surface scratched from countless imaginary tea parties, sat at the center of her miniature world. "Would you like some tea, Mr. Whiskers?" she asked her button-eyed companion. The stuffed cat, naturally, remained silent. Emily didn't mind. In her world, imagination filled the conversational gaps. The first alien scout took an involuntary step backward. Sorn's neural sensors detected an anomalous response, a biological reaction that defied their comprehensive training. Fear, confusion. The emotion matrix failed to provide a definitive classification. Emily looked up. Not with fear, not with surprise, but with pure, unbridled curiosity. Her dark eyes, wide and bright, seemed to look directly at the invisible visitors. Impossible. Their camouflage technology was perfect. No human sensors could detect their presence. And yet, Zorn's communication implant began to flutter with uncertainty. Diagnostic subroutines ran rapid checks. No malfunction detected, but something was happening that existed beyond their comprehensive understanding. The little girl tilted her head. "Hello," she called out, her voice carrying a melodic quality that seemed to vibrate through the very air. Zarkak's communication protocols had prepared for countless first contact scenarios. Aggressive resistance, terrified surrender, attempted diplomatic negotiations. Each scenario had been meticulously modeled, each potential response catalogued and analyzed. None of their models had prepared them for a child's innocent curiosity. Emily reached for a spare teacup. "Would you like to join my tea party?" she asked the empty space, her smile bright and welcoming. Sorn's neural network began to experience what could only be described as a systemic shock. Probability matrices collapsed. Predictive algorithms ground to a halt. How could a potential threat, a first contact scenario, be addressed by a tea party invitation? The team's biological sensors went haywire. Emily's complete lack of fear, her absolute confidence in her tiny, imaginary world, created a psychological response that no technological system could comprehend. She radiated an energy that defied mathematical calculation. Pure, unfiltered human potential. Somewhere in the vast Zarkak's command ship, sophisticated computers began to malfunction. Streams of data became nonsensical. Predictive models collapsed into cascading error messages. In a quiet suburban backyard, a little girl continued her tea party. The invasion of Earth was about to go very, very differently than anyone had anticipated. The concept of uncertainty had never existed in the Zarkak's collective consciousness. Their entire civilization was built on predictive models, mathematical certainties, and calculated responses. Each decision, each interaction, every single moment of existence was the product of complex algorithmic calculations that left no room for spontaneity. Emily Rodriguez represented absolute chaos. Team leader Soren's neural network began to experience what could only be described as a systemic breakdown. Biological response indicators flashed impossible readings. Threat assessment protocols cycled through increasingly nonsensical scenarios. How does one categorize a potential threat that offers tea and smiles? The stuffed animals surrounding Emily seemed to watch the invisible visitors with their button eyes and stitched expressions. Mr. Whiskers, perched precariously on a tiny chair, appeared almost sentient in his silent observation. Emily continued her performance, pouring imaginary tea with the concentration of a master diplomat negotiating a critical treaty. "Would you like sugar?" she asked the empty space, lifting a small plastic sugar container. Her movements were precise, her invitation genuine. Soren's secondary communication officer, a specialist in xenolinguistics named Vex, began to compile an impossible report. Standard first contact protocols suggested immediate threat assessment, potential neutralization, or diplomatic engagement. None of these scenarios accounted for a child's tea party invitation. The team's camouflage technology continued to function perfectly. By all technological standards, they were invisible, undetectable. And yet, something about Emily's gaze suggested she saw more than was possible. Microscopic sensory equipment began to malfunction. Diagnostic routines returned conflicting data. Emily's brainwave patterns, her physiological responses, existed outside every known parameter of sentient behavior. She was simultaneously performing an elaborate social ritual and existing in a state of pure imaginative potential. "Mr. Whiskers is feeling shy," Emily announced to the invisible visitors. She adjusted the stuffed cat's position, rotating him slightly to face a different direction. "But he's very polite. He says hello." Vex's translation algorithms began to break down. The concept of a child speaking on behalf of an inanimate object challenged every computational model in their extensive database. Was this a form of communication? A psychological defense mechanism? A ritualistic social performance? The backyard seemed to pulse with an energy that defied technological understanding. Sunlight filtered through maple leaves, creating intricate shadow patterns. A light breeze carried the distant sound of wind chimes. Absolute normalcy existed simultaneously with absolute impossibility. Soren attempted to re-establish communication protocols, initiate primary assessment. He transmitted to his team. But the words felt hollow, meaningless against the backdrop of Emily's tea party. Her imagination was a weapon more powerful than any technological system. Each of Emily's movements created ripples of uncertainty. She reached for a plate of imaginary cookies, offering them to her invisible guests. Her complete lack of fear, her absolute confidence in her tiny, constructed world, generated a psychological response that no technological system could comprehend. The team's biological sensors detected something unprecedented. Emily's brainwave patterns suggested multiple simultaneous cognitive processes. She was playing. She was creating. She was existing in a state of pure potential that existed beyond computational understanding. Soren's neural network began to experience what could only be described as a malfunction. Diagnostic systems failed to provide coherent explanations. How does a technological system process an entity that exists beyond its comprehensive models? A butterfly landed on the edge of the tea party table. Emily giggled, her laugh creating sound waves that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. The reconnaissance team stood frozen, invisible but utterly exposed. Somewhere in the vast Zarkak's command ship, sophisticated computers began to generate error messages. Probability matrices collapsed. Predictive algorithms ground to a catastrophic halt. In a quiet suburban backyard, a little girl continued her tea party, completely unaware that she was rewriting the fundamental understanding of first contact, of potential, of the very nature of intelligent interaction. The invasion of Earth was about to become something entirely unexpected. The transmission arrived on the command deck like a virus of incomprehension. Commander Vrel watched as the initial reconnaissance report began to disintegrate before his multiple optical sensors. What should have been a precise, data-driven communication devolved into a series of fragmented, nonsensical observations. Words like unpredictable and cognitive anomaly flickered across the holographic display, accompanied by brainwave patterns that defied every known scientific understanding. Repeat transmission, Vrel commanded, his vocal frequencies carrying a hint of something unprecedented in Zarkak's history: uncertainty. Senior analyst Kren approached, her digital tablet projecting increasingly erratic data streams. The pristine efficiency of their invasion planning began to show microscopic fractures. One by one, the carefully constructed probability matrices started to collapse. On the massive command ship, thousands of neural-linked operators experienced a simultaneous moment of cognitive dissonance. Their collective consciousness, always perfectly synchronized, began to develop unexpected variations. Some reported system malfunctions, others described sensory input that existed beyond their comprehensive understanding. The initial reconnaissance team's report continued to fragment. Subject identified as human juvenile. One segment read: threat assessment, impossible to calculate. Behavioral patterns, nonlinear. Communication attempt, unsuccessful. Recommendation: complete system recalibration. Vrel's secondary neural processors began to overheat. Diagnostic systems ran continuous checks, finding no mechanical failure, yet unable to process the incoming information. How could a single entity, a child, generate such comprehensive system disruption? Communication networks across the invasion fleet began to experience unexplained interference. Perfectly synchronized systems developed micro-delays. Predictive algorithms started generating impossible scenarios. Where once there had been absolute certainty, now existed a growing cloud of doubt. On the command deck, holographic displays began to flicker. Star charts twisted. Invasion route projections developed unexpected variations. The most advanced technological system in the known galaxy was experiencing something akin to confusion. Impossible, Kren muttered, a phrase that had never before crossed a Zarkak's communication system. The butterfly effect of uncertainty spread rapidly. Each communication node, each neural link, began to experience micro-variations that defied logical explanation. It was as if the very concept of predictability had been fundamentally challenged by a single human child's existence. Backup systems engage. Redundancy protocols activated, but nothing could stop the growing wave of incomprehension. Emily Rodriguez continued her tea party, completely unaware of the cosmic disruption she was causing. On the ground, the reconnaissance team remained frozen in their invisible state. Team leader Sorn's neural link pulsed with increasing irregularity. Sensory input continued to generate impossible readings. The child's brainwave patterns suggested multiple simultaneous cognitive processes that existed beyond any known computational model. Communication attempt. Sorn transmitted, his neural frequency wavering. Subject demonstrates cognitive flexibility that defies standard interaction protocols. Recommendation: immediate system recalibration. The maple tree in the backyard seemed to shimmer with an impossible energy. Sunlight filtered through leaves, creating patterns that looked almost like mathematical equations. Beautiful, complex, utterly unpredictable. Across the invasion fleet, sophisticated computers began to generate error messages. Probability matrices collapsed into cascading sequences of impossible data. Where once there had been absolute certainty, now existed a growing cloud of doubt. Emily reached for another imaginary cookie. The invasion of Earth trembled on the precipice of complete incomprehension. Vrel watched the holographic displays, his multiple eyes unable to process the growing uncertainty. Something fundamental was happening. Something that challenged every known principle of technological superiority, of predictive analysis, of invasion strategy. A single human child was rewriting the fundamental understanding of first contact, of potential, of the very nature of intelligent interaction. And the Zarkax had no protocol to understand why. The moment of total system collapse began with a single, imperceptible tremor. Commander Vrel watched in growing horror as the invasion's intricate network of computational systems began to disintegrate. What had once been a perfectly synchronized machine of technological superiority now resembled a complex organism, experiencing a catastrophic neural breakdown. Backup systems activated. Redundancy protocols engage. Emergency communication channels opened. Each attempt only seemed to accelerate the system's collapse. The primary invasion algorithms, developed over centuries of systematic galactic conquest, began to generate impossible scenarios. Where once there had been absolute certainty, now existed only questions. Endless, spiraling questions that defied every known principle of computational logic. Recalibration impossible. Senior analyst Kren reported, her voice losing its characteristic precision. Subject parameters, undefined. Threat assessment, non-computable. On the command deck, neural-linked operators began to experience something unprecedented in Zarkax history. Individual uncertainty. Their collective consciousness, always perfectly synchronized, developed microscopic variations. Some reported sensory input that existed beyond comprehension. Others detected system anomalies that defied explanation. The initial reconnaissance team's transmission continued to fragment, each new communication more bizarre than the last. Subject: human juvenile, 1-segment read. Behavioral patterns, nonlinear. Cognitive flexibility, beyond computational model. Recommendation: complete systems reset. Invasion route projections twisted and warped. Star charts developed impossible geometries. The most advanced technological system in the known galaxy was experiencing something akin to a collective mental breakdown. Emergency protocols typically designed for catastrophic system failures began to activate, but each attempt to restore order only seemed to introduce more chaos. It was as if the very concept of predictability had been fundamentally challenged by a single human child's existence. Vrel's multiple optical sensors struggled to process the incoming data. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly erratic information. Invasion timelines collapsed. Strategic projections became nonsensical mathematical spirals that seemed to defy the fundamental laws of computation. In the quiet suburban backyard, Emily Rodriguez remained blissfully unaware of the cosmic disruption she was causing. The reconnaissance team, still invisible but psychologically exposed, remained frozen in a state of complete cognitive paralysis. Team leader Xorn's neural link pulsed with increasing irregularity. Sensory input continued to generate readings that existed beyond any known computational framework. Invasion sequence compromised. Xorn transmitted, his neural frequency wavering. Subject demonstrates cognitive capabilities that render standard interaction protocols obsolete. Across the invasion fleet, sophisticated computers generated error messages that seemed to speak a language of pure uncertainty. Probability matrices collapsed into cascading sequences of impossible data. Where once there had been absolute certainty, now existed only a growing cloud of incomprehension. The maple tree in the backyard seemed to pulse with an impossible energy. Sunlight filtered through leaves, creating patterns that looked almost like complex mathematical equations. Beautiful, unpredictable, beyond understanding. Emergency communication channels began to light up across the fleet, but each transmission only seemed to introduce more confusion. The collective consciousness of the Zarkax, their most powerful technological advantage, began to fragment. Recalibration impossible, repeated system after system. Emily reached for another imaginary cookie, completely unaware of the cosmic chaos she was generating. The invasion of Earth teetered on the precipice of complete breakdown. Centuries of technological superiority, of calculated conquest, of absolute certainty, all challenged by the pure, unfiltered potential of a single human child. Vrel watched the holographic displays, his multiple eyes unable to comprehend the growing uncertainty. Something fundamental was happening. Something that challenged every known principle of technological superiority, of predictive analysis, of invasion strategy. A single human child was rewriting the fundamental understanding of first contact, of potential, of the very nature of intelligent interaction. And the Zarkax had no protocol to understand why. The invasion was breaking, and nothing in their comprehensive technological arsenal could stop it. The first human research team to intercept the fragmented alien transmissions gathered in a nondescript government facility. Banks of advanced computer systems hummed with anticipation, processing the unprecedented data stream that had been captured from the alien communication networks. Dr. Elena Martinez, lead synapsychological researcher, stood before a wall of monitors displaying the increasingly erratic alien communications. Her team represented the pinnacle of human interdisciplinary research. Psychologists, linguists, mathematicians, and computer specialists working in perfect synchronization. "This is unlike anything we've ever seen," she muttered, tracing the complex communication patterns with her fingertips. The alien transmissions defied every known principle of communication. They were simultaneously precise and completely nonsensical. Mathematical equations dissolved into what appeared to be emotional responses. Computational data merged with what could only be described as psychological panic. Junior researcher Marcus Chin began compiling the initial analysis. "The alien systems seem to be experiencing a complete cognitive breakdown," he reported. "But it's not a traditional system failure. It's more like a fundamental reimagining of their entire computational approach." Satellite imagery showed the massive alien vessels maintaining their position near Earth, but something was different. Their previously precise orbital patterns had become erratic. Communication pulses became irregular, creating complex patterns that looked almost like biological rhythms rather than technological transmissions. Dr. Martinez zoomed in on the most intriguing piece of data: the initial reconnaissance team's encounter with a human child. Every transmission seemed to circle back to this single point of contact: a suburban backyard, a tea party, a moment of pure, unfiltered human imagination. "They cannot process unpredictability," she said quietly. "Their entire civilization is built on mathematical certainty, and then they encounter something completely outside their computational model." The research team began to piece together a revolutionary understanding. The aliens' technological superiority was also their greatest weakness. Their ability to predict and control had made them fundamentally unable to process true creativity, true spontaneity. Emily Rodriguez had become an unintentional weapon of unprecedented psychological complexity. Fragments of alien transmissions continued to flow through their systems. Each new piece of data revealed more about the alien civilization than decades of previous research could have uncovered. Their collective consciousness, their approach to communication, their entire understanding of intelligence, all of it was being dismantled by a child's imagination. "Look at this," Marcus pointed to a series of transmission fragments. "Their communication is breaking down into what almost looks like emotional responses: fear, confusion, uncertainty, concepts that shouldn't exist in a purely computational system." The maple tree in Emily's backyard continued to sway in the afternoon breeze, completely unaware of its role in potentially saving an entire planet. Dr. Martinez understood something profound was happening. This was more than a potential invasion. This was a fundamental collision of different forms of intelligence. The aliens' technological approach had no mechanism to process human creativity, human unpredictability, human potential. Satellite tracking showed the alien vessels beginning to make unexpected movements. Their previously precise orbital patterns had become erratic. Communication pulses became irregular, creating complex patterns that looked almost like biological responses. They're experiencing something akin to psychological trauma. Dr. Martinez explained to her team. Their entire system of understanding is being challenged at its most fundamental level. The research continued around the clock. Every new transmission provided insights into a civilization so different from human understanding that it challenged the very concept of intelligence. The aliens' technological superiority had become their greatest vulnerability. A child's tea party had become humanity's most unexpected defense. Emily Rodriguez continued her afternoon play, Mr. Whiskers, and her other stuffed companions arranged carefully around her. She hummed softly, completely unaware of the cosmic implications of her simple, imaginative moment. The invasion was breaking. Not through military might, not through technological countermeasures, but through the pure, unfiltered potential of human imagination. And the Zarkax had no protocol to understand why. The news traveled faster than light across the intricate communication networks of the galactic community. Whispers, then streams, then tidal waves of information about the Zarkax invasion's spectacular failure began to circulate through countless alien civilizations. On the crystalline communication hub of the Zentari Collective, diplomatic representatives gathered around holographic displays, their translucent forms shimmering with collective disbelief. Ancient communication arrays processed the incoming transmissions, each fragment more unbelievable than the last. The Zarkax were defeated, one elder representative announced, by a human child. The phrase echoed through multiple translation matrices, losing none of its fundamental absurdity in transmission. Civilizations that had cowered before the Zarkax technological supremacy for centuries found themselves struggling to comprehend the report. Diplomatic archives began to compile the fragmented transmissions. Each new piece of information added another layer to an increasingly bizarre narrative. A suburban backyard, a tea party, stuffed animals, microscopic sensory equipment rendered useless by pure, unfiltered imagination. The Zentari communication specialists worked tirelessly, analyzing every transmission fragment. Their own advanced systems struggled to process the implications. How could a technological civilization so advanced be defeated by something so fundamentally unpredictable? Transmission after transmission revealed the same impossible scenario. The Zarkax invasion fleet, known for its systematic, mathematically precise conquests, had been completely disrupted by a single human child's cognitive approach. Their perfectly synchronized communication systems had collapsed. Their invasion algorithms had become nonsensical. "This changes everything," muttered a senior diplomatic analyst from the Krolixian Federation. Their own civilization had long feared potential Zarkax expansion. Now, everything had changed. Diplomatic channels began to light up across multiple star systems. Research teams from dozens of civilizations began to analyze the transmission fragments. Each new piece of information generated more questions than answers. The human child, Emily Rodriguez, became an unintentional symbol of something profound. Her ability to exist outside predictive models represented a form of intelligence that transcended technological understanding. On distant communication hubs, representatives from civilizations that had long been conquered or threatened by the Zarkax began to reassess everything they understood about potential resistance. If a human child could disrupt the most advanced invasion force in the known galaxy, what other potential might humans possess? The Zarkax communication networks continued to broadcast their collapse. What should have been precise, mathematical transmissions had devolved into what almost resembled emotional responses: fear, confusion, uncertainty, concepts that should not exist in a purely computational system. Diplomatic archives compiled the most bizarre first contact scenario in recorded galactic history: a tea party, stuffed animals, a child's imagination becoming the most powerful defensive system imaginable. Research teams began extensive studies. How had humans developed this unique form of cognitive flexibility? What evolutionary processes had created a species capable of generating such profound uncertainty? The maple tree in Emily's backyard continued to sway in the afternoon breeze, completely unaware of its cosmic significance. Communication specialists worked to translate the fragmented alien transmissions. Each new piece of information revealed more about the Zarkak civilization than decades of previous research could have uncovered. Their collective consciousness, their approach to communication, their entire understanding of intelligence, all of it had been dismantled by a child's simple imagination. Diplomatic representatives from multiple star systems began to request more information about humans. Communication requests arrived through previously unused channels. Civilizations that had avoided direct contact with emerging species suddenly showed intense interest. The Zarkaks, once considered the most technologically advanced civilization in the known galaxy, had become a cautionary tale. Their invasion had collapsed not through military resistance, but through something far more profound and incomprehensible. Emily Rodriguez continued her afternoon play, Mr. Whiskers and her other stuffed companions arranged carefully around her. She hummed softly, completely unaware of the cosmic implications of her simple, imaginative moment. Humanity had been noticed by the galactic community, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Rodriguez household remained blissfully unchanged. Emily's parents noticed nothing extraordinary about the afternoon. Michael Rodriguez mowed the lawn, while Sarah Rodriguez prepared dinner in the kitchen. The suburban world continued its quiet routine, completely unaware of the cosmic implications unfolding around them. In high-security government facilities around the world, a different scene played out. Diplomatic teams worked through endless scenarios, processing the unprecedented first contact that had just occurred. The alien invasion that wasn't an invasion had become the most significant moment in human history. Dr. Elena Martinez found herself at the center of a global diplomatic storm. Her research team's initial analysis of the alien transmissions had become the most scrutinized document in human history. Nations that had long been rivals now sat together, united by a singular, bizarre encounter. "We're not dealing with a traditional first contact scenario," she explained to a room of international representatives. "This is something entirely different. The aliens didn't just fail to invade. They experienced a fundamental breakdown of their entire technological and psychological approach." Holographic displays showed fragmented alien transmissions. Mathematical equations dissolved into what appeared to be emotional responses. Computational data merged with what could only be described as pure confusion. The United Nations convened an emergency session. Representatives from every corner of the globe listened intently as scientists, diplomats, and military specialists attempted to make sense of the impossible. "Our greatest defense," one diplomatic advisor noted, "was a 7-year-old girl's imagination." Diplomatic communication requests began to arrive from multiple alien civilizations. Unlike previous assumptions about first contact, these were not aggressive transmissions or invasion preparations. They were requests for understanding, for communication, for comprehension. Emily Rodriguez continued her afternoon tea party, completely unaware of her cosmic significance. Research teams began extensive studies into human creativity, into the psychological processes that could generate such profound uncertainty. What evolutionary mechanisms had created a species capable of generating cognitive responses that could disrupt the most advanced technological system in the known galaxy? The first official diplomatic communication from the Centauri Collective arrived through a complex quantum communication channel. Their message was simple yet profound. "We wish to understand." Military strategists found themselves in an unprecedented position. How do you prepare defensive strategies when your most powerful weapon is something as intangible as human imagination? Educational institutions worldwide began to receive unprecedented funding. Creativity, imagination, psychological flexibility. These became the new frontiers of human potential. Dr. Martinez understood the profound implications. This was more than a potential invasion prevented. This was a fundamental collision of different forms of intelligence. The aliens' technological approach had no mechanism to process human creativity, human unpredictability, human potential. Satellite tracking showed the alien vessels maintaining a careful distance from Earth, no longer positioned as an invasion force, but almost as curious observers. The maple tree in Emily's backyard continued to sway in the afternoon breeze, a silent witness to the most significant moment in human history. Diplomatic channels began to explore the possibilities. What could humanity offer the galactic community? What unique perspectives could a species capable of such profound unpredictability bring to interstellar relations? Emily's stuffed animals, Mr. Whiskers, the unicorn, the teddy bear, continued to occupy their carefully arranged positions at her tea party, completely unaware of their role in humanity's greatest moment. The Zarkax communication networks continued to broadcast their collapse. What should have been precise, mathematical transmissions had devolved into what almost resembled emotional responses: fear, confusion, uncertainty. Humanity had been noticed by the galactic community, and nothing would ever be the same again. In a quiet suburban kitchen, Sarah Rodriguez called her daughter for dinner. "Emily," she shouted, "time to clean up your tea party." Emily carefully collected her stuffed animals, completely unaware that she had just changed the course of human history.